Hey, what's up? Emily here. Today I'm going to talk about our wrists in our yoga practice. Wrists are important and we use them a lot. We spend so much time asking like heaps of extension from our wrists. Every time we're in a downward dog, chaturanga, like cobra, this work becomes so much more useful when you start moving into things like arm balances, handstands. Taking care of your wrists is just like super underrated. So if you are someone who finds that after a yoga practice your wrists feel like a little bit yuck, or if you want to start doing the work to prevent that feeling from ever happening, keep watching, because we're going to go through some things that we can sneak into our yoga practice, some exercises we can add in or do separately, and then some self-care massage stuff, because I am a massage therapist and I just can't not talk about it. Cool. So essentially what we're going to be focusing on here is not only our wrists and our hands, but the muscles in our forearms as well. So we think about our forearm flexors, which is like the underside of our wrist and up toward the elbow, and then our forearm extensors, which is the top of our, not in our hand, but they come up the other side. So the muscles on the underside of the arm help our wrist do this, and the muscles on the outer side of the arm help our wrists do this. So sometimes with doing lots of like work on our hands, we forget to utilize these muscles on the underside. So every time you put your hands on the floor, whether you are in your child's pose or like your tabletop, I want you to get used to placing your hands and placing your wrists in a safe way. So a way to do that, and I'll usually, if I'm teaching like a full class, I'll usually mention this at the beginning so we can get used to it and get the feeling of it before we start putting a lot of weight on our hands. But coming into like your tabletop, think about popping your hands down on the floor, spreading the fingers out nice and wide, and then thinking about pressing down into the thumb and into the pointer finger knuckle. A lot of the time what we can see is people's hands kind of starting to pop up like this, and you can kind of fit something under there. Not only are we putting pressure kind of more into the smaller bone in our arm, but we're just decreasing the amount of space that we've got on the floor. Like we're decreasing the foundation that we've got on the floor, keeping us balanced. So what we think about from the elbow down is like we're spiraling the forearm inward, and we press that knuckle down toward the floor. That's a really nice thing to get that arm awareness, that hand awareness going. It's the same as when we pop our feet on the floor in like our Tadasana and stuff. You spread out the toes, you find that really good like kind of weight placement on your feet. We do the same thing for our hands. So after that, once you've got your hands in that nice position, start really pressing down into the fingers, pressing down into the knuckles. So every little joint, every little knuckle we've got going in our finger, press it down into the floor. And what that does is activate the underside of the arm. So already by pressing our hands down into the floor, if we kind of try to pull them up more, we find that we get really dominant through this side. So even that out and press it down. Now, even in this tabletop shape, I'm asking for like 90 degrees of bend or 90 degrees of extension from my wrist, which can be a lot. If you kind of bring your hands directly in front of you and then try to bend them backwards, you might notice, I'm a flexible person naturally, but you might notice you don't naturally get 90 degrees. That's the first thing that we'll work on when like pain-proofing our wrists, is just playing with that flexion and extension. And I like to do that. So coming into your seat, this is often, again, a way that I'll start a class before we even pop our hands down on the floor, especially if that's like a hand-based class, like forearm balances, like crow and bakasana, things like that. Hands out in front, take your fingertips to point them up toward the ceiling, and then pull them down. So as we activate one side of our forearm to pull the hand back, we're stretching the other side, and then opposite. So this is like a stretchy, strengthening thing. So we're pointing our fingers down, pointing them up, and just finding that active range which I just love to bang on about. And then with the palms kind of pointed forward, we're going to, as quickly as possible, scrunch the fingers up in a fist and then spread them out as wide as you can, and do that like 1 trillion times as quick as you can. I tend to do it for like 30 seconds, a minute. You will start feeling this pretty quick in your forearms. And you just do this as many times as you can. Set a timer on your phone. Time like 5 long breaths, whatever you need to do. Or until just your arms are like, I've had enough. Whew. And then once you finish that, just give your arms a little bit of a wobble, a little bit of a wiggle. It's a really nice thing just to get some movement through the wrists. Again, like if I've got people coming to classes and they've got tricky wrists, I'm like, come 5 minutes early and do this stuff before you get on the mat, because not every class, not every lesson is going to give you that time like in the warm-up, if that makes sense, or before your sun salutations. So get it done. All right, next thing we can do is, again, coming into that tabletop, we're going to come into our nice shape with our hands. My fingers are spread, I'm pressing down into all my knuckles, especially that pointer finger knuckle, especially into my thumb. And then it depends how strong you're feeling, it depends how much weight you want to place on the wrist. If you want less, sit back towards the heels, so more of your weight goes over your heels. If you want more, kind of stack your shoulders on top of your wrists. Now what we do is we come up super high. So I've just got 4 fingers on the ground. See, I'm lifting my palm up off the floor. And then I'm going to pretend I've got something squishy like a ball of blue tack or gum or whatever, a tennis ball. And then super slowly I squish, lower my palm back down to the floor. I lift it up and I lower down real slow. Lifting it up, lowering it down. And again, like there's no magic number. Do this until you feel it. Try to get in a couple times before you practice, after you practice. If you want to strengthen your forearms, want to strengthen your wrists, this is a great thing. So this one you should be feeling on the underside of your wrist or in your forearm flexors. And it's really important, like I mentioned before, that these are nice and strong for when we spend lots of time on our hands. So I feel like I've demonstrated this now. And again, once you finish that, just give it a little bit of a wiggle. You can get a little bit crazy. And then another thing we can do, just sitting back on the heels, sitting in Sukhasana, whatever feels good, is just finding different ranges of motion in your hands. So yes, we have this way and this way we've talked about, but we also have like our waving, ulnar radial deviation. So you can just come into one way and then point them down, go to the other way and point them back. And I've seen this done, people stabilizing their forearm on blocks. That can be a nice thing to do, but I know that's not always handy, and especially if you're just warming up before a class. I'm kind of talking about this like we can all go to public classes at the moment. That'll be relevant one day. Like I'm going to watch this video back and be like, remember when we weren't allowed to go out? Anyway, so again, just finding range of motion in the wrist, healthy range of motion, roll the wrist around. So, you're in your class and your teacher is like, sick, we're going to do handstands today. And you're like, I know my wrist is going to hurt after this. A cool thing we can do is using a wedge. Often our younger teachers will use a wedge. If you don't have a wedge handy, which I don't, I do have this cool like balance board handy. I'm going to flip it over. I see people do this with like weights, like plate weights. You can get like a half block, anything that's like a couple centimeters off the ground. And so what we're doing, we're going to pop kind of the bottom of the palm, this part of the palm, just above the wrist, on top of our plate weight, whatever it is, as long as it's steady and as long as it's not going to slip, that's important. And then we pop all 4 knuckles on the ground, the thumb probably won't make it. And again, we still think about pressing the fingers down, pressing the knuckles down. We're still activating that underside of the wrist. We're still really strong, but you'll see there's not as much of an extreme angle through the wrist. So even though I never really get pain in my wrists, I always do this if I'm working handstands. Like excessively, or especially press work, because you often have to like come forward over your wrists a lot, and it just takes some of that acuteness of the angle in your wrists. So again, you're in a public class, you don't want to jump up and grab something, you don't want to interrupt the sequence. You can roll your mat. And that's what I did the other day. I was on a Zoom class, I didn't have anything, and I just rolled my mat up. That's a nice hack that you can use. And then another thing for wrist care is I brought along my massage ball. You can use a golf ball, lacrosse ball, baseball, hardball, I don't care. And again, we're going to be thinking about that underside of the wrist and on top of the forearm, underside of the forearm, and just find like the meaty parts. Put a little bit of weight, not too much, and just roll up and down. And if you find any kind of like nodule bits that feel really yucky, you can kind of roll back over them, just keeping that muscle cared for. Or you can go the opposite way and just roll it. That feels so good. That's a nice thing to do. If you don't have a golf ball, literally just get a thumb and strip it down. Use some oil. I like to do that before bed sometimes. But yeah, talking about the wrists, kind of in terms of these muscles here, but also in terms of like how we choose to place our hands down on the floor. I still catch myself kind of coming into this shape and then expecting myself to be able to balance on my hands. Kind of giving yourself the best setup and the best kind of rehab, the best aftercare you can to keep your wrists healthy, to keep them pain-free, and to keep you practicing well into your later life. I think longevity in your yoga practice is a really cool thing to aim for, rather than just like smashing out a trillion handstands for the Instagram picture and then not being able to bear weight on your hands anymore, you know, or pick up your kids, or like eat pasta, like the important things. I hope this was helpful for you. I want to get lots of these out while I've got time, obviously in lockdown. If you have a request for a body part you want to like yoga proof, or an injury that you're curious about, I'd love to know about it, and I would love to help. So let me know. Take good care. Do some yoga. I'll see you later.